why would you wipe out your family to be with me?
Why not just get a divorce? Why not just walk away? Take bankruptcy, leave, do whatever you want, but why kill everyone? Why not just get a divorce? Why? Why not just get a divorce?
Hello and welcome to True Crime Rocket Science, the most credible voice in true crime. Do you remember the refrain that sort of haunted the Chris Watts case for quite a long period of time right in the beginning? People like Dr. Phil, the district attorney, commentators all over the place, Ashley Banfield and others, would repeatedly ask why. Why did he do this? Why did he do this? And what do you think the answer was? Ultimately, what is the answer to that question? And I think there are a lot of people whose answer to the question is Chris Watts committed this crime because he's a narcissist and maybe a sociopath. That's kind of why he committed the crime. And so I guess if you had to pose the same question to Nicole Kessinger, and this is obviously for those who believe that Chris Watts committed the crime because he's a narcissist and a sociopath, and also those same people who believe that he had an accessory or accessories, I think they don't really care about what the reason is. It's also something like, then she was also a narcissist and a sociopath, right? So I guess what I'm saying is, if you have such a shallow standard, such a low standard for your motive, for why someone acts the way they do, then the particular question that's being asked has got nothing to do with you. You should just leave, go somewhere else, because you're not interested in why. You're interested in who, I guess. You are interested in saying, oh, because I saw that this person's definitely involved. And then if someone says, okay, so if they're involved, why did they do it? It doesn't matter. I don't need to say why. I just know that they were involved. I just know it. But why? Why would they be involved? No, that doesn't matter. I know they were involved. I've often said on this channel and on Crime Rocket that True Crime Rocket Science is about the science of man. It's about trying to understand human beings and starting that quest with criminals, and where everybody is saying we don't understand, we will never understand. And bear in mind, the district attorney was one of them, almost proudly saying, I don't think we're ever going to understand this case, and I'm going to just wash my hands and walk away. We will just never know why. And that is diametrically opposite to True Crime Rocket Science's position, which is you can most certainly find out why, and you can certainly find compelling arguments to explain what happened. Not to justify what happened, not to say, woohoo, I'm so glad you did what you did, I would have done the same thing. But to say, these were the forces at work, and this is what this idiot did in these circumstances, and this was the maladaptive response to stress and whatever. And this is how it all ended. It all ended in tears. And then come from there, and you can apply it to your own life and say, well, is there a lot of financial stress in your life? Are you capable of making idiotic decisions when either you're in love or when you're falling out of love? Do you get resentful and revengeful? Do you allow emotions to get the better of you or whatever? Because when we can start to understand why in other people that don't necessarily matter to us, then we can start to understand why in the people that do matter to us, and most importantly ourselves, we can do something that is maybe not very constructive or not very practical or not very wise or not very moral. And we can look at ourselves and say, hey, why are you doing this? Where does this come from? So when we look at Nicole Kessinger and we say, hypothetically, and obviously True Crime Rocket Science doesn't believe she was an accessory at all, but if you take that psychology a bit further and you say, okay, hypothetically, let's say Nicole Kessinger was involved in this scenario as stated by these conspiracy theorists. Why would she have done what she did? Sort of, why wouldn't she have just pushed Watts to get a divorce? That would have been much safer and much easier, wouldn't it have been? So do you remember how Rourke and everybody was saying, why didn't Chris Watts just get a divorce? And most of those people sort of did ask that question without expecting an answer. They just kept saying, what an idiot, why didn't you just get a divorce? And I think a lot of those people still don't have the answer. They still don't know why. True Crime Rocket Science has provided the answer. It's in the books that I've written. There's a deep psychological thing behind it. Not saying he was right to do what he did, but he was doing it because of a certain set of psychological parameters based on the kind of person he was, the kind of patterns of behavior he was always doing. So if you look at someone like Nicole Kessinger, you can say the same thing. Okay, so she decided to commit triple murder or whatever, try to help him commit a murder. Why wouldn't she just get a divorce as well? Why not just get a divorce? I mean, you've met this guy, maybe you really like him, maybe you do want to make a life with him, but why not just, make sure that he gets a divorce? I mean, do you believe or don't you believe that Nicole Kessinger would have looked for an apartment for him? Don't you believe that? So let's say you say, I don't believe that. Then I guess the alternative is, do you think that she thought she was going to move into his house? Do you think that she thought she was going to move into his house? But she knew that he was going to lose the house. I mean, that was something she knew about right from the word go, right? So now you've taken away that incentive. She also was very aware that he was buying things on Anadarko gift cards, right? And she says very matter-of-factly in her interview with Agent Kobach, she says, I don't think he was making a lot of money. She knew about the financial problems. So what is the incentive in being with this guy besides money? Right? So if you take the money away, it's not a huge incentive to be in a relationship. Maybe you do love him, maybe you're in love with him, and maybe the sex is good, but are you committed? Are you 100% committed to this guy? And then you say, well, okay, look at Dietergate. With Dietergate, she went in the house and she came back out and she was like, I don't know why you want to lose all of this. And there she's withdrawing and she's saying, I don't really want to be involved. Not saying, you better get divorced right now or whatever, or you better sort this out right now. She's saying, I'm out of the game. And he's saying, no, hold on, I'll fix this, I'll sort it out. And the thing is, Watts was doing a delicate dance between two women. The one woman he was trying to just keep off his back in terms of his affair, and the other one he was trying to convince and reassure that everything was fine. He was going to get a divorce. But then the time came where he couldn't lie to both of them. But he had lied. He had said on the date on Saturday night, he'd said, the divorce is virtually finalized. They're about to get divorced. And obviously at that point, his premeditation was in a high gear. He knew what he was going to do. And with Shanann, he'd spoken to very briefly about divorcing, that he didn't want a child, really in the last days and possibly the week. But Shanann wasn't letting him sort of have that. She wasn't going to go without a fight. And then he realized that was just something he couldn't do. He didn't know what it was going to look like getting a divorce. He didn't know what the financial implications were. And so he felt he couldn't go through with it. But what about Kessinger? Did Kessinger not want a divorce? Which mistress wouldn't? Which mistress in the world wouldn't want a divorce? Not that this matters to a lot of people that follow the conspiracy theories, but if we go through the discovery, then we know what Nicole said to Charlotte Nelson on the 12th of August. She said, I'm not sure about him. She said, I want my own family. I don't want to be second. And this is something she probably did say to Watts. It came up in the third confession as well, that she didn't want to be second. And I don't think someone who says, I don't want to be second, says, okay, look, I'm going to commit murder with you, and that'll mean I'm making sure that I'm first, and I'm also making sure for you that I'm first. Isn't it more likely that someone who says, you know what, I don't want to be second. I don't like to be treated as second. And I can give you a little bit of an anecdote with regard to this. I took someone out to dinner a couple of times, and then she went on a holiday somewhere over Christmas, and then she came back, and then she invited me to a lunch, and she kind of made a weird arrangement. She said, I'm gonna stand in front of the door and wait for you there. And I think I was something like 5 minutes late, and by the time I got there, she'd left. And I didn't have my phone with me, so I couldn't call her right then. So I went back home, got on the phone, and spoke to her. And she said, I waited for you. You were late, so I'm not going to be treated this way. And I was like, wow, she was the one who wanted to meet at the door, and I didn't mean to be late, but she left the announcement, the invitation for the date very late as well. Anyway, and then she said, you know what, I'm a single mother, and I've got a child, and I've got to be on time for my child or whatever. And to be perfectly honest, my instinct to that, because I don't have children like Nicole Kessinger, my instinct to that was, wow, I understand that you want to make your child a priority, but I feel like I'm always going to be second in this equation. And maybe that's right, but I'm not sure if I like it, and I'm not sure if I can deal with it, especially given what has just happened, right? And that is exactly the kind of reservations Nicole Kessinger had. And bear in mind, he doesn't just have one child, he's got two, and he's not telling her about the third on the way. And for those who believe that there was a third on the way, well, then the equation's even worse. Then she's definitely going to be a distant second or third, right? But how does that equate to murder? How does that equate to say, you know what, I don't think you should get a divorce. I think you should get a murder, let's commit a murder together. It does make sense where Kessinger said, when Chris did pay for their meal at the Lazy Dog on August the 11th with the baby blue credit card. I think that whole thing, getting a babysitter and paying with a blue credit card, was in a way him demonstrating, okay, look, the divorce is definitely happening. And this is the part that I think so many people are missing. Forget that it's Nicole Kessinger, forget that it's Chris Watts. Just imagine two people that are engaged in an affair, and they engage in an affair for not a really long time, so not years and years and years, but a certain prescribed amount of time. Whether you want to make it 6 weeks or 6 months, it's a certain amount of time, right? And then the relationship really gathers momentum, but then something happens. There's an interruption to this momentum, and the one person involved in the affair then goes to join his family somewhere else. And what is that going to do to everything? It's going to test the commitment of everybody. It's going to test the commitment of the woman, the mistress, where she's going to say, how do I feel about this guy not being with me after he's been with me all this time, and now he's with someone else? It's going to test that commitment. It's also, and if it tests it in a way where she says, wow, I really want you back, I miss you, she's also going to want reassurance to say, I know you're with your family wherever you are, but I hope you are going to leave them. How are things going there? Please convince me that things aren't going very well. And so what did Chris Watts do? He slept apart from Shanann. He didn't talk to her very much. Even back at home, they sort of slept apart, right? And Kessinger kept sending him nude selfies and conversing with him constantly, and that was a way also to know, yes, he's telling the truth. He's with me, he's not with her. I don't think Nicole is being truthful when she says she wanted Chris to repair his relationship with Shanann when he left for North Carolina. Maybe she said it as a way to test him, and then he would say, check his response or see what he said. And what he said was Shanann didn't want to try and wanted a divorce. People have pointed to Nicole Kessinger deleting her text messages as like a smoking gun and saying, well, that is she's hiding something. She had to have been involved. But if you were in a relationship with someone and you sent embarrassing text messages, well, let me put it in another way. Do you think if Nicole Kessinger could turn back time and she could change the messages she deleted, do you think she would hand over everything and sort of say, okay, guys, just take all of this and guess where things would now be? You would have nude photos or photos with blurry sections or whatever, part of the whole Chris Watts circus aftermath. That would be part of it. Can you imagine what that would be like for somebody? I mean, is that stuff part of the narrative? Everybody knows what it involves, but is it part of the narrative? Do we really need to know that? And the police felt that they didn't. And obviously it was concerning that she deleted it, but one's also got to see it in context. She got rid of that and she was somewhat forthcoming with other stuff. And obviously if you want to test this case, if you want to test the case of a mistress who does get involved, then go and read my book Murder Most Foul, which is about Patrick Frazee. In that case, Patrick Frazee asked his mistress several times to murder his fiancée, the mother of his child. He asked her several times. He gave her a murder weapon. He gave her a baseball bat or a pipe. She elected to poison her coffee, all sorts of different things. In other words, he wanted her to do his dirty work. And it wasn't because he was a coward. I think he was trying to be clever. He was trying to arrange things so that he could get away with murder or get her out the way. I mean, he was a coward. I'm just saying, I don't think he was as cowardly and as pathetic as Chris Watts, but he was trying to wangle things so that he wouldn't literally have to get his hands dirty. And in the end, what he did was incredible, incredibly brutal and unbelievably violent. I mean, he smashed his he smashed his fiancee's body to death with a baseball bat. And there was this huge spray of blood and a pool of blood in her apartment. And his mistress had nothing to do with that. She wasn't even in the state when it happened. But he did manage to recruit his mistress to go and clean everything up. And that made her an accessory after the fact. And one thing that I felt tested her commitment was when she stepped into that apartment in Woodland Park, she saw this incredible spray of blood everywhere, and then she must have realized what he had done to her. And she cleaned it up anyway. I think she said it took something like 4 hours to clean it all up. And she did quite a good job. She almost did a perfect job, but not quite. But the fact that she was confronted with this scene, this bloodbath, and she cleaned it up anyway because her lover had asked her to, it was something he said, this is how you're going to prove to me that you love me. And this is how she said to herself, when I do this, it's the final thing, and then we're going to live happily ever after. We are going to be a family together. And the difference between Crystal Kenny and Nicole Kessinger is Crystal Kenny had had a baby and an abortion with Patrick Frazee. Patrick Frazee had said to Crystal Kenny, please don't marry this guy. And then she married him anyway, and then thought about his offer all the time. Thought about this guy that she turned her back on all the time. And their history went back something like 10 or 12 years. It went back a really, really, really long time. And as I say, she eventually did divorce her husband to be with Patrick Frazee. And of course, by then he was with somebody else. So he was using her. But the fact is, there was significant life events at stake. And she was being led to believe that there would be a marriage and that they would live together and they would have children together after initially failing to do that. There was the suggestion of marriage and then the failure to marry. And the whole murder was a way that she thought this was going to bring this about. But he was manipulating her. But it's in the Frazee case that you see how these mechanisms play out. And you see how Crystal Kenny was clearly guilty, tried to evade and avoid the cops, didn't speak to them at all or lied to them, and then finally did speak to them with a lawyer present and sort of somehow managed to secure a plea deal, and then she went through the scene and said how she was involved. Nicole Kessinger didn't do any of that. She didn't need a lawyer. She didn't need to take anyone to any scene. And one of the big differences between these two mistresses, the one's phone had some messages on them, not going back all that far. I'm talking about where there was a lot of traffic, right? And the other one had lots of messages at the time that the crime scene was going on. I'm talking about lots of messages, one after the other, where someone is saying, giving instructions, saying, okay, go there, meet me there. Okay, now let's do this. Have you cleaned that part up? Make sure about that, whatever. And those messages were also deleted, but they were also found. They also found what was going on. And the most important thing is, after the crime, there was the movement of the cell phones of Frazee and Crystal Kenny and the victim moving together. You had none of that happening with the Chris Watts case at all, or Nicole Kessinger. But you can make a sensible argument. You can argue it from the perspective of what she says. You can argue it from the perspective of another case, so intertextuality. You can argue it from the point of view of psychology, where you say, why would she prefer to commit murder rather than try and petition for a divorce? You know, why would she want to do something like that? Like, it's something that I've said quite often is, if you've met someone and you say, okay, I really like you, okay, well, let's murder someone and then I think we're going to live happily ever after. Really, would you want to go out with a murderer? And then some of the responses I've gotten are, but there's so many people who wrote to Chris Watts. You know, that's a little bit different. These are people who don't know him from a bar of soap and are attracted to his notoriety. This is someone who's in an everyday relationship with him. And this is the part that I think so many people just completely don't register, is if the whole idea was to murder Shanann and the children, then why was there no aftermath? So in other words, Nicole Kessinger, these conspiracy theorists say, murdered Chris Watts' family, but then nothing happened. Why was she not supporting this man that she loved so much? Why was she not more heartbroken when he was caught? Why was she not more heartbroken that she was sort of, you know, in police custody? Why, if the whole plan was to sort of end up together, did they not end up together and they both lost their jobs? I mean, if the plan was to end up together, why did she not support him afterwards, even secretly? I mean, it really looks like she dropped him like a hot potato on pretty much day 2 and never looked back. It very much looks like she is disgusted with him and doesn't understand why he was doing this, in the sense of, did you want me? Did you think I wanted you to do this? And the answer is no. Chris Watts didn't do it because he thought Kessinger wanted him to murder his family. Why he did it was more than likely because he thought Kessinger wanted to be first in his life and he wanted to give her that. And in his ape brain, that is how he solved the problem, was by getting rid of them and putting her first, just in a totally absurd way. But because he'd said, we're getting a divorce, we're getting separated, that would be kind of a symbolic version of her disappearing or her dying in his mind. That was how he was dealing with it, by lying about it, by cheating life, just the way that one cheats debt, not death, debt. And of course he was trying to cheat the deaths that he'd incurred in this case as well. I'm not going to take it any further. I just think if you really want to go into the whole psychology and say, why did Chris Watts commit this crime, and you're not going to ask the same question of Nicole Kessinger, then what are you doing? And also, if you ask the question deeply enough, why did Chris Watts do this, and you know the answer, the deep answer that makes sense, then then there isn't an answer for why Kessinger would do it. There isn't a deep version to it, because they weren't that deeply involved. I think they were quite infatuated with each other, but not to that extent, certainly from her side. I think he was addicted to her. I think she was falling in love with him. But there's a difference between being addicted and love. So tomorrow on this channel will be the next Christopher Watts What Else Do We Know episode. I think it's episode 18, and that will be dealing with the sentencing hearing and also that period between. We're going to look at that a little bit, but especially the sentencing hearing. I'll be doing my first TCRS live on Patreon at 10 EST Eastern Standard Time on Sunday, 10 o'clock Eastern Standard Time on Sunday, or 10 a.m. That'll be on Patreon, so it'll be my first live. One of the topics under discussion will be this one that we've dealt with here, but also certain things about the shadows on the driveway that have never been discussed before, certainly as far as I know. So if you're interested in tomorrow's episode, please subscribe, like, share, leave a comment. And for those interested in a little bit of a new dimension to the Patreon channel, come and join us on Patreon on Sunday at 10 EST. Thank you for listening.
He's so disgusting. I'm so ashamed of him.
Why? How? I don't even understand how you could, bring yourself to do that to somebody who's, that big.